Today we will make watercolor flowers and use some negative painting techniques. I'm painting with Ella. Notice that we have watercolor paper taped down to a table, and we're starting off with just a simple pencil drawing. I am first adding a circle in the upper left side of my paper and another circle in the lower right side. These are going to be the two flower centers. Next, we are adding some petals, and I'm doing that by going out, kind of making some wavy lines, and then coming back in towards the center of the flower. I know it's kind of hard to see, but I'm trying to push down kind of light so that my pencil lines don't show up later in my drawing. So basically, you can add any kind of petals to your flower depending on what kind of flower it is. You could make it more skinny and long petals or more round and fat petals. It doesn't really matter. But I wanted to go ahead and add petals all the way around. And then if you can tell on mine, the flowers petals would touch. So I just decided to have one flower a little bit behind the other flower by making those petals behind, and that's just fine. So Ella is now finishing up her petals on her flowers, and even though they look different than mine, they will totally work for this project. Now she actually made hers a little short so that her flowers don't touch, but you can definitely bring those petals all the way out and have them overlap each other. Next, we're going to add some stems by creating kind of a curved line that comes down from our flower, kind of like a snake. I'm adding one of those on both sides so that each flower has a stem. And Ella is doing the same. And then I'm also going to throw a little bud in the middle, so I have a short stem, and then I'm just going to put an oval shape on that to kind of look like a bud that hasn't quite opened up yet. Next, I'm going to add some leaves that come out from the stems. You can add as many or as few as you would like. I have some that are just a single leaf, some that are double leaves. For mine, I'm trying to make it so that the leaves kind of either run into each other or overlap each other. Try to kind of fill it up with a couple different leaves. All right, next we're going to be using some watercolor paint. And while Ella finishes up her leaf drawing, I'll kind of describe what we're going to do. So I have a flat brush. This is not quite 1 inch, it's probably like a 1/2 inch brush. And the first thing I want to do is just wet down my paper. Give it kind of a nice covering of water. I don't want it to be like a lake, but I do want it to be completely covered in water so that when we add the color, it'll just kind of spread out. The paint will go wherever the water is. So we want the paint to go all over the paper and just kind of spread out. And I'm just going to use the primary colors, so red, yellow, and blue. So I'm starting with yellow, and I'm just going to add some yellow in a streak across my picture, and you can see that it just spreads out wherever that water is. And the more paint you add, then the brighter the color. So I don't want my colors to be super bright because we'll be adding a lot more paint to this later. This is the lightest layer, so I just want kind of a hint of color on my picture. And then I'm saving the blue kind of for the corner area. I want those to be a little bit darker, but I want to keep the actual flowers a little bit lighter. So I'm trying to just kind of streak the blue a little bit around the outside edges more, not quite into where the flowers are. Now we have to let this dry. So I'm going to leave my brush in the water for now and walk away and then let it dry. Okay, now that the paper has dried, I am using a smaller brush, and basically I'm going to make a layer of paint everywhere on my paper except for the flowers. So I'm painting around the flower outlines And then I'm spreading the paint out to cover the rest of the paper. And I'm starting kind of with this blue on the top. I'm adding lots of water so that it spreads out around the other areas of the paper. But I'm being very careful around my flower edges so that my flowers stay that first layer of paint. So I'm just following my pencil lines, going around the edges of my flowers. And we'll start adding some other colors too. Now Ella was making a great outline around her flower, but she has to fill in the rest of the paper too. So I'm having her for sure fill that in. It's good to do it while the paint is still wet, otherwise you'll have kind of some strong lines. So it's important to kind of keep going and keep that nice and wet so that there's no harsh lines in your picture. Use lots of water to get that layer in. Now you can see too, I'm also painting around the bud as well. So the flowers and the bud, I'm leaving that first layer of color. And now I'm working on my second layer of color. I'm going right over the leaves. I'm adding a little bit more yellows down here. And then just really trying to get that second layer of color in. Now I sped up this video a little bit, so we are going fast. If you need to pause to catch up at any time, please feel free to do that so that we're not going too fast for you. So now I have my entire second layer on my picture, and I'm going to help Ella out a little bit, just kind of fill in the rest of hers. Go around her little bud. Get all that filled in with color. So this is kind of a tricky part in that you want to really be careful with your edges. We want to make sure it gets all filled in. So now we're going to let this layer dry as well. And we're going to go into another layer. So for this layer, we are going around the leaves this time as well. So before we went just around the flowers, now I'm making another layer, a darker color, more rich color, and I'm painting around the leaves and around the stems of the flowers and the buds so that I have yet another layer of color. So I am taking my brush, you can see I'm getting it a little wet with water and then adding some color to it, and I'm finding any of those spaces around the leaves to fill in with more color. And I'm going around the petals again too, to just kind of make all of these their own little separate areas. And so you can see as I paint around the leaves, then they all of a sudden start popping out from the picture. I'm painting around the flowers again, and around each of the little areas, trying to keep it nice and neat. And Ella is doing the same. She's adding a little bit of dark to her sky, which she can do either leave the sky lighter or she can make it a little bit darker. So she wanted to add a little bit more darkness to the top part of her picture, where I'm adding a little bit more dark to the bottom. We're going to go ahead and fill in these areas with that next layer of color. Now another thing I'm doing is I'm going in and deciding which leaf is in front of which, and I'm just darkening the edge next to it just a little bit to kind of bring one thing forward and putting one thing back. So Trying to kind of indicate that with the flowers too by just adding a little bit of color where they overlap each other so that one of them pops forward and the other one kind of sits back a little bit farther. So if you want to get fancy, you can kind of do those types of details as well. All right, next Ella and I are going to add some color to the center of our flowers by dropping in some red and some yellow to make kind of an orangey center. And this really helps the flowers pop. I'm also going to add it to the bud. Add some color down there by throwing some red and a little bit of yellow in there. And then we are going to remove our tape by pulling it away from our painting to make sure that we don't rip the paper. And voila, there you have it, our beautiful flower paintings with negative watercolor technique. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you are able to experiment with this process as well. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe down below to get more notifications of when we put out more videos, all right? Have a good one.